Hello everybody, welcome to this video. It's the continuation in my series on Much Ado About Nothing. Pick up the ebook at mrbruff.com for just £3.99, also available at Amazon if you have a Kindle. So we're up to our analysis of Act 2, Scene 3, and this is really a split screen scene. The audience sees both Benedict and those he's eavesdropping on. They know what Benedict does not, that this is a setup aimed at getting him to believe Beatrice is in love with him so that he will reveal his love for Beatrice. If you ever watch the film version with Kenneth Branagh, this is probably the highlight of the sort of comedy in the whole movie. And, Shakespeare is absolutely brilliant here. It's interesting to think about Shakespeare and how he can write the most broad range of texts, the funniest comedy moments, the saddest tragedy, and he does it all. Amazing. Little summary then quickly. Well, sitting alone in the orchard, Benedict is thinking about the change in Claudio, how Claudio was this brave soldier and now he's in love. And he basically says that, he wants to keep resisting falling in love himself because he thinks that men who fall in love are idiots. They're like, wobbly jelly or oysters, he says. And this gets him thinking about the kind of woman that he might like to marry if one existed who had all the characteristics he would demand of a wife. Now, while he's enjoying his thoughts, which he shares with the audience as a thinking aloud soliloquy, Claudio, Don Pedro and Leonato enter, so Benedict decides to hide to overhear their conversation. Of course, the trio know where he's hiding, and they intend to make up a conversation purposely for him to hear. To string things out, they've arranged for Balthazar to sing them a song about how men deceive women, and Benedict is not impressed by this song. Hearing about the fraud of men seems to spark conversation about a supposed previous conversation in which Leonato revealed that Beatrice was in love with Benedict. Claudio reports back to the group about how Benedict is reacting using country metaphors to do with trapping birds and catching fish, and we'll look at those in this video. Benedict believes the story Leonato tells of Hero's love because he feels sure Leonato is too old and serious to be involved in trickery. Beatrice's love, I should say. Now, in the overheard conversation, the strength and desperation of Beatrice's love for Benedict is contrasted with the horror she has of Benedict discovering it because he will mock her. And Don Pedro says he wishes Beatrice were in love with him. Now, although they list Benedict's good points, Don Pedro manages to turn these into insults, and on the strength of these characteristics, the trio decide it would harm Beatrice to tell Benedict of her love. Instead, Hero should tell her to forget about him. As they leave the orchard, Don Pedro says they should get Hero to play the same trick on Beatrice, and meanwhile they'll send Beatrice to call Benedict in for dinner. And that is where we see the biggest comedy moment in the entire, probably the entire play. Now, partly because he's heard that Hero told her father of it, Benedict believes Beatrice must be in love with him, so he decides to return her feelings. He changes his mind about marriage, saying the world must be peopled, as in populated, despite knowing that he's going to be teased by his friends. Yet, when Beatrice comes to call Benedict in for dinner, she's abrupt and aggressive, and Benedict is convinced by this behaviour that she is definitely showing signs of love. So the first thing to talk about is the fact that this again fits into the genre of comedy. Overheard conversation is a favourite device in Shakespeare's plays, particularly in his comedies. And actually, if you think about modern comedies, it's something we see in a lot of modern comedy films as well. The stage on which the plays were performed had two pillars, which were ideal for hiding behind in such a way that the audience could see the actor who ducked away again at key moments. Now, productions have lots of fun, inventive places for Benedict to hide while listening to the conversation, and of course responding to the news of Beatrice's supposed love. But we see here the overheard conversation as a generic convention of comedy. In terms of the structure, it's quite interesting. This scene begins with Benedict justifying his decisions to remain a bachelor, and it ends with him justifying his decision to return Beatrice's love. Now, throughout the scene, he's speaking in prose. You can see it on the screen here. There's no rhyme, there's no certain amount of syllables per line, it's just literally prose. But when Beatrice comes to call him in for dinner, he changes the way he speaks. He actually speaks in pretty much blank verse, which is where we have unrhymed lines of 10 syllables with a repeated pattern of unstressed and stressed, which we know as iambic pentameter. It's as if now there are two ways of looking at this. Number one, on a very simple level, he changes when she comes to him, which shows how his feelings are changing, how he has essentially allowed himself to fall in love with her now. But the second thing is, it's as if he's trying to use elevated, sort of posh love language towards her. The theme of appearances versus reality appears again in terms of the dramatic irony in this scene. So Benedict is convinced he's overheard something that was meant to be kept secret for him, while the audience knows he's falling into a trap and is meant to overhear the conversation. Now, when the audience knows something a character on stage does not, that's what we call dramatic irony. And another example of dramatic irony occurs when Beatrice comes to call Benedict. The audience knows why Benedict is behaving strangely, but she does not. And the audience also knows that she's not been dying of love for Benedict, so there are no marks of love for Benedict to spy in her, even though he is convinced that he does. Finally, a little comment on the language. When Claudio says, stalk on, the fowl sits," he's using the image of a hunter stalking a game bird. Benedict is essentially a sitting duck, unable to escape, so definitely hearing what they say. Giving the next update, Claudio says, "Bait the hook well, this fish will bite," suggesting he'll fall for the trick, hook, line and sinker, as we say. And as they leave, Don Pedro uses another image related to catching when he says, "Let there be the same net spread for her." So watch for the similar thematic imagery. All of this imagery to do with animals and to do with hunting, which is used. Very, very funny scene in the play. I hope you found this video useful. Please do subscribe to the channel.